Of Charlie Kirk, that highly influential conservative activist who was gunned down yesterday while he was at an event, holding an event at Utah Valley University. Thousands in attendance. Now, as far as we know, the person who shot him is still at large, but we are hoping to learn more right now. It is about 7:14 a.m. in Utah, very early for a press conference. This could be substantial, so let's listen in.
Participating in a student-sponsored event with Turning Point USA. Charlie was shot at that event. He was transported to a local hospital where he later passed. Last night, his body was moved to the state office of the medical examiner. We will continue to facilitate movements to get him home today and with his family. Yesterday, during the investigative process, we located a couple of persons of interest. We interviewed those individuals, and after releasing them and after clearing them of being suspects, they faced scrutiny. They faced threats. We asked the public to be patient with the investigative process. These individuals were not suspects. They were people of interest. We ask that you do not impose into those people and that investigative process. They don't deserve that harassment for being subject to that. I'd like to thank all the investigators that are involved in this. They have worked around the clock. All day yesterday, through the night last night, investigators from the State Bureau of Investigations, from county, from city agencies, the university, our federal partners with the FBI, the ATF, and many others. Those are just a few of the people that we have involved in this. I'd like to thank all of them for their strong work. Through all that work last night, we were able to make a few breakthroughs. We were able to track the movements of the shooter. Starting at 11:52 a.m., the subject arrived on campus, shortly away from campus. We have tracked his movements onto the campus, through the stairwells, up to the roof, across the roof to a shooting location. After the shooting, we were able to track his movements as he moved to the other side of the building, jumped off of the building, and fled off of the campus and into a neighborhood. Our investigators have worked through those neighborhoods, contacting anybody they can with doorbell cameras, witnesses, and have thoroughly worked through those communities, trying to identify any leads. We do have good video footage of this individual. We are not going to release that at this time. We are working through some technologies and some ways to identify this individual. If we are unsuccessful, we will reach out to you as the media and we will push that publicly to help us identify them. But we are confident in our abilities right now, and we would like to move forward in a manner that keeps everyone safe and moves this process appropriately. Last night I communicated with Erica. The family's devastated. As a commissioner of public safety, as a father, as a husband, I can only imagine what that family's going through. The heinous event that happened yesterday is not Utah. This is not what we're known for. Over the past several weeks, we've seen this state come together to help families in mourning, come together as a community to show what Utah is known for a state of character, of service, of camaraderie, of a neighboring feel. We will not stand for what happened yesterday. We are exhausting every lead. We have every officer invested in this, every investigator, every local agency. The outpouring of support from the law enforcement community has been astounding. We are investing everything we have into this, and we will catch this individual. Having walked through the crime scene, through the hallways of this school, through the classrooms, I can't imagine what the people on scene felt as well. A horrific event where some of them barricaded in classrooms, some of them ran in fear. Can't overstate the tragedy and the horrific event that yesterday was, and how we will work to bring to justice the actions of one individual or any other individuals that assisted in that. Our state has gone through a lot, and we will come out successful. With that, I'll turn the time over to Special Agent Bowles in charge.
Good morning. My name is Robert Bowles, and I am the special agent in charge of the Salt Lake field office. Following yesterday's tragic shooting of Charlie Kirk, FBI agents have been working around the clock in coordination with our law enforcement partners. We are and will continue to work nonstop until we find the person that has committed this heinous crime and find out why they did it. This morning I can tell you that we have recovered what we believe is the weapon that was used in yesterday's shooting. It is a high-powered bolt-action rifle. That rifle was recovered in a wooded area where the shooter had fled. So the FBI laboratory will be analyzing this weapon. Investigators have also collected footwear impression, a palm print, and forearm imprints for analysis. Now, I understand there are a lot of questions about motive. I assure you that all leads, tips are being fully investigated. As of this morning, we have received more than 130 tips. We thank the community for that. The FBI has brought every resource to bear, and we will continue to do so throughout the course of this investigation. The FBI's mission is to protect the American people. It's to uphold the Constitution of the United States. Any attack on the First Amendment is an attack on the very foundation of our democracy. That is why we will relentlessly pursue this case and the shooter until we find him. We also continue to grieve with the family and the community. It's our community. If you have any video or images from the shooting, we ask you to please submit them to our digital media tip website at www.fbi.gov/Utah Valley Shooting. You can also call the FBI at 1-800-CALL-FBI. We truly rely on the public's help in these types of cases, and no tip is too small or insignificant. Thank you.
Absolutely. So what I'll release about the suspect is suspect blended in well with a college institution. We're not releasing many details right now, and we will soon. But right now we're not. But that individual appears to be of college age. We are confident in our abilities to track that individual. If we're unsuccessful in identifying them immediately, we will reach out for the public's help and the media's help in pushing those photos. That was a new development overnight, working through the night, studying those cameras. So that's something that's new and that we're working through right now. As far as the security, I cannot speak to that. Neither the Department of Public Safety nor the Federal Bureau of Investigation was involved in the planning or security of this event, and that'll have to be a question later for other agencies.
Suspect could be hiding in the woods, and is that suspect possibly still in this area?
So that's a good question, and it's a question that goes to the safety of the community, right? No, not in those woods. We've walked through those woods and secured it. As to the community, I can tell you that this was a targeted event. We don't believe that the community is at risk. However, we are exhausting every resource to find him. And we will do so. So I can't comment specifically on his face or any details such as that, as it's continuing to be a part of the investigation. And again, we'll release that shortly. However, we're doing everything we can to find him, and we're not sure how far he has gone yet, but we will do our best. We have images of the suspect. Again, as part of the investigation, we're not releasing any details such as that right now. We are exhausting all of our resources to be able to collect those, but that's, again, part of the investigation. Excuse me? We are working on that, but again, part of the investigation that I can't release. Not at all. We've got complete and total support from everyone, from the director on down, and it's been an incredible supportive environment so far. All I can say is that we're working the investigation the best we have with the environment we're given. So thank you.
You have been watching a press conference out of Utah this morning, one day now after the assassination of Charlie Kirk. We thought it would be a substantive press conference, and indeed it was. The commissioner of the Department of Public Safety there in Utah and the special agent in charge of the Salt Lake City FBI Bureau talked about the suspect, and we learned quite a bit. We learned they believe it is a college-aged individual who, as they put it, blended in well with those at the event. We also learned that they've recovered what they believe to be the weapon, described as a high-powered bolt-action rifle. They have palm prints and they have footwear impressions that they believe, along with good quality video, will be enough to track this individual at this time. They are not releasing a name or footage for the public to comb through as of yet. Right now, they feel they have it down. Carter Evans is down on the scene and asked some questions there at the press conference. Carter, what stood out to you?
Well, you know, they seem pretty confident that they have an idea of this individual that they're looking for. And as the special agent in charge was walking away here, I mentioned that he said the word he many times, and he did confirm that the subject that they are looking for is a male. As you mentioned, they found that rifle in the woods. I asked if they thought he might still be in the area. They said they searched that wooded area and they were able to clear it. The one thing that they did point out is that they were able to track his movements from very early on, from the time he entered campus to the time he entered the building, went up the stairs, got on the roof. The shooting occurred, and then they see him jumping down from the building to another building, and then escaping off into a neighborhood. They went into that neighborhood also to gather more video from Ring cameras and such. They are not sharing that video with us, as you mentioned, and they will not get into details exactly what that video shows. Did they get a good look at this individual's face? That is unclear. That's a question they would not answer. I did ask them if they were able to get any fingerprints or DNA off the gun, perhaps, and that is something that they are working on right now. He said they spoke with the family, and they are absolutely devastated, as you can imagine. And he also mentioned how scary this was for students, and I noticed that when we were walking into the hall here today. There are chairs still scattered all over, backpacks on the ground. He said many people have barricaded themselves in the classrooms, terrified for their lives.
Understandably so. Carter, thank you very much for your coverage there. Let's bring in our justice correspondent, Scott McFarland, who's also been following this. Scott, it was notable to me that they said they have good quality footage of this individual, and they're bringing technologies to bear in order to try to identify who it was. What stood out to you from that press conference?
And Tony, I've been messaging some law enforcement sources about that detail. They have good video, but they don't want to share it. What does that mean? A couple different takeaways here. That is an indication of competence. Carter says those law enforcement leaders seem competent. They sure do. If they don't want the public's help to look at imagery to help identify somebody, they may think they're close. But also, in this new era of citizen sleuths putting out images of people and having people misidentified by the public, that can go far. That can metastasize and cause trouble for people misidentified. And you heard them at the beginning of that news conference say there's been threats against or hassling of the people who were detained briefly yesterday and released for having no connection to the shooting. They don't want that to happen, too. A couple other notes that I underscored here. The arrival time of this shooter, 11:52 a.m. local time in Utah. That's 8 minutes before the event began yesterday. This is not a situation where somebody was there with plenty of time to set up an elaborate setup and do elaborate planning on site. It's a pretty quick turnaround. And they say no danger to the public. Tony, an indication this is very much a targeted political assassination.
Certainly seems that way. Scott, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Our coverage of this murder investigation will continue on our streaming channel, CBS News 24/7, and you can also find more on your local news and tonight on the CBS Evening News. Many of you will now return to CBS Mornings already in progress. This has been a CBS News Special Report. I'm Tony DeCopel in New York.
Tony, thank you very much. I'm Errol Barnett at the CBS News Broadcast Center here in New York City as we continue to cover the investigation into the assassination of conservative activist Charlie Kirk in Utah yesterday. Anna Schechter is here with me in studio. She's the senior coordinating producer for the CBS News Crime and Public Safety Unit. And Anna, you and I were sitting together listening to this press conference out of Utah from the special agent in charge and other lead investigators. What jumped out at you most? We'll get into some of the specifics in a moment, but the fact that they do have video that they're not yet releasing to the public tells us they've made some headway, but not all headway yet.
They described the video as good video, so it suggests a level of confidence, but we have no indication of an exact identification. They described this individual as appearing to be college age, so giving some details which they might have a few potential names, but they didn't really tell us anything definitively. What stood out to me, though, is that they have footprints that they're analyzing. They believe they have the weapon that was discarded in the woods that was found by investigators. So that's a big lead. An important find. ATF obviously had been on the scene since yesterday. So a lot of news, actually, more than expected out of this press conference.
Yeah, and we're in the first 24 hours of this incident happening. And I think what was so bizarre for so many people yesterday as we look at footage of Charlie Kirk holding this event, throwing out hats, was that there are thousands of people there with cameras, many witnesses, but almost immediately people were taken into custody, then released. And yesterday evening, they didn't have a suspect in custody, and even this morning. So the fact that this high-powered bolt-action rifle was obtained in a wooded area, that you mentioned the shoe print, a forearm impression as well, what will they be doing right now with that information?
Well, as we speak, there are multiple lines underway. So let's take the gun first. So ATF is on that. They're going to try to trace that back, locate any information about the purchase of that weapon, if they can. So that's one lane. Now, a footprint, that is something that they could maybe guess at height and weight of an individual and match that with the footage that they have. But that's not a very specific way to go. So it's still really tricky. This is a huge problem for investigators, and the fact that it was so chaotic yesterday and that this individual was able to flee the premises and that investigators thought they had the right guy, had the wrong guy, all of that delayed and delayed, giving the shooter the edge to get away. It reminds me of Mangione, who we were covering, who was able to escape Manhattan with all the security cameras.
That's right.
And it was 5 days, almost 5 days before he was arrested, and it was the public that helped. So I'm going to be looking for potentially in the next hour or two, are they going to release some images and ask the public for help?
Which is what I was going to mention to you. Someone in the public was able to identify Mangione because images had been released. In this case, they're not yet releasing footage. They're saying because they've got technology, they think what they need. But he says that the investigators, perhaps they will release footage if needed. I want to jump quickly to our Carter Evans, a correspondent who is in the room. You got a question in, Carter, about the sense of unease for the community there, considering this person is still on the loose. And you asked if people should still be fearful and if the suspect is in the area. Tell us about what they told you.
Yeah, so what I wanted to know is they found this rifle in the woods nearby, and I wanted to know if they believe that individual had escaped into the woods, and are they sure that he is not in this community anymore. What they told me was that they cleared that area of woods. They did not say where he was, but they did say that they believe, of course, that this was a targeted attack and no one else is in danger. I think it's important to note that they said they have a tremendous amount of video of this suspect, everything leading up to his climb up to the roof on the building, the shooting, and then his escape afterwards into a nearby neighborhood. Then they canvassed that neighborhood looking for more cameras, Ring doorbell cameras, security cameras, that sort of thing. They presumably collected even more video there. And I find it interesting that they don't want to release this video to the public just yet. That leads me to believe that they have some pretty good leads on this individual and that they might have a pretty good picture of him. Why wouldn't they release it to the public? Well, it could start a frenzy here, and there are a lot of online sleuths that could be looking into this and misidentify people, and it sounds like they have confidence in the information that they have right now. They said that they've received over 130 tips on this line, and they pointed out how scary an event this was on campus yesterday as well. There were students in here who barricaded themselves in classrooms. When I walked into the auditorium here, I noticed it. You could see chairs scattered all over the place. There's still some backpacks here. It was a terrifying event for people.
Yeah, Carter, and they've even asked for people who were there and have information to call 1-800-CALL-FBI or head to fbi.gov/Utah. It's interesting to me because you're at Utah Valley University. The campus is closed through the week, but you've described and painted a pretty chaotic scene that has been left behind. And I know you've been talking with people there too. Help us understand what things look like and how people in Orem are feeling today after this horrific event.
You know, the people I spoke to mainly last night are clearly still in shock. I mean, they have vivid memories of what they saw. Many of them that I spoke to were up very close. They saw this in great detail. And remember, this is someone they admired very, very much, and they watched him get assassinated right before their very eyes. You know, according to these folks, this was supposed to be a fun event, a safe space, open for debate, for disagreements, that sort of thing. And it was during that very debate where they happened to be discussing the issue with gun violence when that single shot occurred, killing Charlie Kirk.
Yeah, a stunning detail, even to see the footage from right before that shot rang out. Carter Evans is there at the location where the shooting took place and in the room where investigators just gave us an update on their search for the suspect. CBS News Justice correspondent Scott McFarland joins us now from Washington with, Scott, what you are learning. The fact that investigators wanted to have this press conference effectively first thing this morning to both calm the public, and Carter Evans just told us people are still on edge there and in shock, but also to ask the public for help, tells us there's a level of confidence, but they don't know who this person is yet. Give us some insight into why that may be.
They have what they characterize as good video, high-quality video, in this new era where everybody seems to have a doorbell camera in some neighborhoods, and there are so many surveillance cameras and cell phone cameras available. It's not surprising that there's a high volume of video, but they seem confident in the type of video they have, not releasing it to the public. I agree with Carter's diagnosis there that it's a dangerous thing to put video out there to citizen sleuths who may misidentify somebody, and law enforcement is increasingly cautious about that. There are some details about the nature of events and the sequence of events that stood out to me. A bolt-action rifle is how it was described, a high-powered bolt-action rifle. The bolt is one you would use from long distances for superior accuracy. It's often lighter, one that would be used for hunters and those who'd want to shoot from a great distance away. In this case, they've characterized it as about 2 football fields, 200 yards away. But they didn't have much time between the arrival of this shooter and the beginning of the event. They said 11:52 a.m. Mountain Time was the arrival of the shooter on campus. The event began on campus at roughly 12 p.m., so just 8 minutes there. I also think it's important to note that they were asked about what they could release on the appearance of the shooter, and they made clear the shooter was able to blend in with college students, the way he carried himself, the way he was either dressed or moved about the campus indicated that he would not stand out on a college campus. And I think it's always important to emphasize here that they were repeatedly saying he and him, at least limiting the number of people who could possibly be associated with this shooting.
And Scott, I want to walk through some of the details the investigators provided at the top, because what you've just mentioned, the arrival of this suspect on campus at 11:52 a.m. local time, 8 minutes before this event begins, seems to suggest a high level of planning and specific intent here. They said the suspect arrived on campus about 8 minutes before the event, moved up a stairwell, across a rooftop, seemed to blend in well with the college institution, as you've mentioned. And then after the shooting, and witnesses say they heard one single shot. Afterward, the suspect then jumped off the building and fled through a neighborhood where he eluded authorities and is on loose until now. What does that tell you about what it would take? And of course, the rifle that we've mentioned was used. What it would take for anyone to accomplish something like this seems to suggest a high level of planning, coordination, and effort, at the very least.
This is certainly indicative of planning, having the timing, having the particular firearm for that particular mission, and somebody who ditched the firearm in the woods during an escape, potentially a planned escape. But I think it's important to underscore this was not an invite-only event. This was a publicized event where the location and the time were known to anybody interested days earlier. There's a number of political events where you have to RSVP and give us your information before we tell you where it is. Those events happen frequently here in Washington, D.C., so they don't have public safety threats at the event. This was different. I mean, Charlie Kirk was advertising the location and the time to draw a crowd of 3,000 to a college campus on a Wednesday afternoon. So there was a capacity and an opportunity for a shooter to plot and plan.
And just a quick programming note for our viewers. President Trump, as you should all be aware, is at the Pentagon at this moment, taking part in memorial services for the 24th anniversary of 9/11. You see him there seated next to First Lady Melania Trump. He is scheduled to give remarks within the next few minutes. Currently, we're hearing from the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and the Secretary of Defense is also expected to speak. As soon as we hear from President Trump, we will bring that to our viewers live. And Scott, Charlie Kirk was instrumental, according to President Trump, in getting him elected, mobilizing young conservatives to head out to the polls and to get him into office. What is the fear that if investigators released too vague of an image of the suspect, that things could get worse, that perhaps it would foment political suspicion and violence in the country if they don't get this right?
The investigators spoke to that right off the bat, Errol, at the news conference just now in Utah. They said that the two people who were briefly detained yesterday as persons of interest, people who ended up having no connection to the shooting, have been harassed and threatened in the hours since in this online ecosphere where people are typing and clicking first and maybe thinking second. It can be a hellstorm put on somebody who's misidentified or unfairly associated with a crime. So if they're being judicious with that, I got to tell you, it really does potentially speak to how important an issue it is that they're not putting video out to the public when seemingly that would only help an investigation to get better tips, to get better intel, to speed up the search. That they're holding back on that is an indication of the moment we're living in.
Scott MacFarlane providing us what he knows there from our Washington bureau as we look at live images from the Pentagon where 9/11 memorial services are underway, and we expect to hear from President Trump momentarily. I want to bring back in Anna Schechter, who's still with me here in studio. And that point, Anna, about the political climate in the country that this apparent assassination is happening in, surely is on the minds of investigators, as Scott just alluded to. How might it change, impact at all how investigators share what they know?
Well, it's a good question. In fact, last evening at the initial presser, the Utah governor called it immediately. This was a political assassination. Now, that was before they had gathered the information that we now have. But it comes at a time of heightened threats against members of Congress, politicians, judges, people in the public eye. We've had a number of high-profile incidences. Look at Minnesota. We just had the assassination of assassination attempt of a state lawmaker. He was injured along with his wife, and one was killed along with her husband. So we are in a really dark time in our history. But I did hear last night a lot of talk about coming together, whether you agree or disagree with Charlie Kirk. He was about open debate and an acknowledgement of that in a lot of different media outlets and discussions online. So I think that was something that I was happy to see yesterday. Charlie Kirk was a very controversial character, according to some. But, you know, when you look at profiles of him, he really considered himself a voice of reason in this youth conservative movement. He liked to think of himself as actually stamping out some of the darker conspiracy theories. You do see clips circulating online of him talking about the Epstein files, sometimes entertaining some conspiracy theories, but he thought of himself that way, which is interesting, and he would dare people to come and debate him. When I look at the video and analyze it, he was so relaxed, so comfortable. Really, there didn't seem to be any sense of an imminent threat at all. So yes, he had his security team, but yes, they also chose a very vulnerable position to be sitting low down with lots of buildings and elevated positions, not covered by law enforcement, not covered by security. That location was extremely difficult to secure. It also proved to be a very easy place from which to flee. The fact that this individual who is seen on some of this footage running away on the roof, what appears to be the shooter, it just goes to show how these outdoor venues are so difficult to secure.
The fact that this happened on a college campus is also part of the calculation here. We're in a moment in the country where college campuses are being highly criticized for not protecting their students enough, either because of rhetoric, dialogue, insults, or their own physical safety. How might that play into the mood of the community and how the investigation proceeds, the role, the responsibility that the university has to keep everyone on campus safe?
It's a great question, and this is something that big institutions have been grappling with. I mean, we just had an assassination of two embassy workers in D.C. get shot as they were leaving an event. It was actually an event to promote peace in the Middle East, and these were two staffers at the Israeli embassy in Washington, D.C. So as we're talking, we can just think about multiple acts of political violence. We also had an attack on a marching group in Colorado just a few months ago. They were marching to raise awareness about the hostages taken from Israel. So we've had half a dozen, as I'm sitting here thinking about it with you, just in the last few months. And then this one really stands out to me because for young people politically engaged, he was so well known, so popular, or even just garnered a lot of response, like love him or hate him or disagree with what he said, because he did say controversial things, but he invited that debate and people did engage with him and engage with him online. So to me, it feels like a huge moment in our country. And obviously the White House thinks so too. President Trump came out with a statement last night. It does feel like a seismic shift is underway right now.
Yeah, very good points there. As we're speaking, Anna, we're looking at Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth at the Pentagon give his remarks on what is the 24th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks. we see President Trump seated next to the First Lady. As soon as the president jumps up to speak, we will bring that to you all to hear what he has to say today. Let's jump back to CBS News Justice correspondent Scott MacFarlane in Washington, because, Scott, you too have covered so many horrific shooting events in the country that have some type of political linkage. Zoom out for us on the bigger picture for people who may not know who Charlie Kirk is, people around the world watching this wondering what is happening in the United States. What is the state of political violence right now in 2025?
The people in charge of securing our elected leaders have been trying to raise a red flag and sound a siren over the last few years, and they're hoping somebody's listening, because the number of threat investigations involving elected officials isn't just increasing, it's increasing by orders of magnitude. Literally 3 times as many investigations of threats against elected lawmakers in Washington now than there were 7 or 8 years ago. Literally triple. So the volume of threats is increasing. The perniciousness of the threats is increasing. So many of them are so easy to make now through social media and through phone devices that it's almost difficult to conceive of how you chase down every single one of them. If there are several hundred a month, how do you get thoroughly through each one of them? That's the baseline concern. But there's also a growing concern here about the metastasizing nature of these threats and these attacks. And there's a symmetry in the imagery of what we saw in Utah yesterday and what we saw last July in Pennsylvania, in Butler. You see the sunny day, the bright day, the sea of red caps and politically interested people, and a person on a stage shot at. And that imagery, I think there's a fear, could spread. It could go further and wider. And security is a primary concern for public officials. We do know that Charlie Kirk had his own private security there on the ground. The university police had said they had been coordinating for some time, and Charlie Kirk was making a nationwide tour of college campuses with his security team. He was to go to Utah State later this month, Virginia Tech later this year. These are grand events with big crowds, but clearly, Errol, with some vulnerability.
And Scott, I'm reminded that you were there in Butler, Pennsylvania. President Trump changed the formatting of his outdoor events while campaigning in the wake of that assassination attempt. I'm wondering, as you talk about the symmetry from your perspective between the two, what your advice and guidance might be to Turning Point USA on these upcoming events, or if you watched that footage yesterday with some sense of shock and a reminder of what you saw happen in Butler.
In both cases, you have roofs involved, too. A shooter on a roof at an outdoor event. There was a concern during the investigation of Butler from people who said that site was way too vulnerable for the event they'd had there in Pennsylvania and the security regimen they did. There is also this consensus in Washington that's growing that maybe town hall events are physically risky and maybe dissuade people from having more events with their constituents because they're difficult to secure, impossible to secure 100%. There are going to be investigations here into any vulnerabilities that may have been missed. But I want to say this on behalf of those I see in the video. These are college kids. These are kids, and they have to live with what they saw. And there is a trauma to these types of events for the people who witness these types of events, and we all should be mindful of what happens to those 3,000 people who saw horror yesterday up close and personal.
And Scott, as we stand by to hear remarks from President Trump, which we understand are just a few moments away, I'm wondering, have we turned a point in America where outdoor, politically related events may become a thing of the past, even with coverage and security and planning?
And the rallies are one thing. Outdoor rallies are a choice often for optics, often for accessibility, and because they do help draw people further and wider if they know they can just stop by a rally, take a seat, and participate in democracy. I think there's a more fundamental perniciousness to this, though. Does it dissuade from elected leaders or public figures from just going out to meet and greet with people on the street, in the neighborhood, at the farmer's market, at the ball game, at the town square, if they believe they're uniquely vulnerable in the outdoors right now? That does kind of erode the fundamentals of democracy. It also just erodes at our civilization. But I've talked to any number of lawmakers over the last year since Butler, Pennsylvania. They are gravely concerned about security, I think wildly more so than even just a few years ago.
It's why it's called a stump speech. Way back in the day, you know, hopeful politicians would get up on a tree stump so they could speak to the people around and draw people in and convince them through their argument and their words that they had the best policy and vision moving forward. We hope that it remains as an aspect of American democracy. Scott McFarlane, thank you so much. We see President Trump now approaching the podium at the Pentagon. Let's listen.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Before we begin, let me express the horror and grief so many Americans at the heinous